This is lecture recording for lecture 13 on digestive system. We begin by taking a look at the overview organization of your digestive system. Your digestive system can be broken down into the digestive tract, also known as the gastrointestinal tract or alimentary canal. Okay. And that includes the mouth, the pharynx, back here, the esophagus, the stomach, okay, through your small intestine and then through your large intestine, all the way the rectum and the anus. Okay, so it's this continuous tract that runs through. Okay. Now, besides these, this GI tract, you also have accessory digestive organs. And these are the other digestive organs that function to contribute to digestion, but are not immediately part of the GI tract. Okay, and these include the teeth, your tongue, your salivary glands, which secrete saliva, the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Okay. You can divide your abdominal regions into quadrants or divisions. Okay, quadrants, there are 4 quadrants, and then divisions, there are 9 divisions. When we take a look at the quadrants, you see that there's a right upper quadrant, RUQ, left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, and left lower quadrant. Okay. And make note of which organs are located in which quadrant. Okay. And then when you divide it into divisions, you can divide it into 9 divisions. You don't have to know all these divisions. The important ones are the epigastric, which is this region above the umbilical region. Okay. Just right beneath the sternum. And then you have these, this umbilical region, you have the pubic or hypogastric region, the inguinal region, right and left inguinal regions. Okay. And then pay attention to also how, which structures are located in which division. Okay. And having this kind of quadrant or division is useful in the communication among healthcare professionals. And for example, you may read a medical note that says a 25-year-old male with no prior medical history comes in with RUQ pain for the past 24 hours. Okay, and so when a doctor sees that sort of information, it immediately gives the doctor a sense of what could possibly be cause. Okay, so lower on the differential would be something having to do with bladder, right? Because a bladder or kidney issues would less likely manifest as right upper quadrant pain. Okay, but among some of the causes that may cause, some of the things that may cause someone to have right upper quadrant pain acutely could be, like I said, gallbladder, your gallstone, right? Or something in the biliary tract. Okay. So that's the use of having these divisions and quadrants. Now let's take a look at the peritoneal cavity and peritoneum. In this class so far, we've already talked about different serous membranes a few times. Recall the pericardium, the visceral and parietal pericardium. We've also talked about the visceral and parietal pleura. Okay, so you have a similar structure located inside your abdominal cavity. Okay, and so the serous membrane in your abdominal pelvic cavity is known as peritoneum. Okay. And like the serous membranes we've seen before, this is also 2 layers Okay, there's a parietal one, and then there's a visceral one. And both layers, they're continuous with one another. Okay, so if you look closely, you'll see that the parietal one adheres to the inner surface of your abdominal cavity wall. Okay, whereas that visceral layer covers most of your abdominal viscera. Okay, so this is a schema we've already seen before. And then in between them, you see this space. Okay, this space between them is filled with a thin layer of fluid. Okay, like as before, it's used for lubrication, right? And that fluid, okay, is peritoneal fluid. And that space is the peritoneal space or cavity, peritoneal cavity. And where you see the two layers of visceral peritoneum coming together to form one sheet. Okay, so it's a double layer of visceral peritoneum. Those places forms a structure known as mesentery. Okay, so here is an example of a mesentery. Here's another place where those two layers of visceral peritoneum fuse together. Okay, here's a mesentery, more mesentery. All this is mesentery. Okay, some mesenteries are given specific names. I don't need you to know all of these, but I'll mention the ones that you are responsible for in just a minute. Okay, but I want to first talk about the function of the mesentery. Okay, so the mesentery, in addition to tethering the digestive organs to the abdominal wall, okay, it also serves to store fat, okay, and also carry blood vessels and nerves that enter those parts of digestive tract. Okay, and it's very important for your digestive organs to be tethered to your abdominal wall. Okay, and that's because imagine if you're running and your small intestine, for example, twists upon itself. Okay, when it twists upon itself, if it's not being tethered to your internal body wall, it could twist upon itself, and then the blood supply to that part, your small intestine, could be suddenly cut off. Okay, and then that part of your bowel can die. Okay, but now when your small bowel is tethered to the body wall, okay, that sort of thing is much less likely to happen. Okay. Now the mesenteries associated with intraperitoneal abdominal organs, which you have to know specific names for. Okay, let me show you here. They are shown here. There is the lesser omentum, which is located between the liver and the lesser curvature of your stomach. You also have the greater omentum that drapes from the greater curvature of your stomach over the large intestines. Here you can see it's been lifted up. Okay, another name for greater omentum is fatty apron. But in this class, please use the term greater omentum for practical. Okay, so but these are all mesenteries, and this is mesentery as well, but this is just a very specific name for this specific mesentery. Okay, more mesentery. Okay, and then there's one more that's known as the falciform ligament. Okay, and here is your falciform ligament. Okay, you can see the falciform ligament anchors your liver to the interior abdominal cavity. Okay, and your lesser omentum connects the liver to the lesser curvature of the stomach, whereas your Greater omentum connects your stomach to your transverse colon, but it drapes over the transverse colon. So if you're to cut open someone's abdomen, right here, okay, first you're gonna see this fatty apron concealing the digestive tract that's posterior to that. So look through this diagram carefully. Make sure you understand it. Now, there are some digestive organs that lack a mesentery, and so they are fused to the posterior body wall. These are known as retroperitoneal organs. Okay, and here, let me show you an example. So in this example here, you can see that these parts of the digestive organs that are enveloped in the peritoneum, these are known as intraperitoneal organs because they're inside. The ones that are only in contact with one layer and they're located in the posterior body cavity, okay, these are considered retroperitoneal organs. So that includes your kidneys, okay. You have the aorta, the inferior vena cava, okay, and also the pancreas. Let me see if I can find pancreas, okay. And the intraperitoneal organs, you can see your most of your small bowel, so most of your small intestine, okay, except for the very beginning part of the duodenum. You may need another image for that. So duodenum is actually partially in intraperitoneal and partially retroperitoneal. Okay. And I may have to show you another image to demonstrate for colon. Okay, the transverse colon is actually considered intraperitoneal. You can see it here, it's intraperitoneal. Okay, whereas your ascending and descending colon are actually retroperitoneal. Okay, so I have created a table on this page, which you can go over to memorize it, and I've provided a mnemonic that will help you memorize those parts. Okay. Now let's take a look at the digestive processes. These are the activities you'll find in your digestive tract. Okay, and these processes include ingestion, so eating, propulsion, mechanical breakdown, okay, digestion, absorption, and defecation. The process of ingestion is taking in food, so eating. Propulsion is the movement of food through your alimentary canal. Okay, and that includes swallowing food. It also includes digestive tract movements known as peristalsis. Okay, and parts of your digestive tract that carry out peristalsis include the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine. So all these parts, they carry out a type of movement, and the purpose of this type of movement is simply to move and propel food through the digestive tract, to move it forward. Okay, and you can see here the adjacent segments of the GI tract alternately contract and relax, and it moves the food along distally. And then the third type of digestive process is known as mechanical breakdown. So mechanical breakdown is also a term used to describe different types of activities. That includes chewing with your teeth, churning. So your stomach, as we'll mention later again, your stomach is a very muscular organ. and it's able to churn up further breakdown the food that has already been first broken down by your teeth. Okay, when I say breakdown, I mean mechanical breakdown. You're breaking large pieces into smaller pieces, smaller chunks. Okay, and that's important. I mean, breaking into smaller pieces is important because that increases the surface area of these food stuff that comes in contact with the digestive juices. Okay, so when there's more surface area of contact with the digestive juices later, okay, it would make the process of digestion more efficient. Now, besides churning, there's also segmentation. Segmentation is type of movement we generally see in the small intestine. Okay, and it's often contrasted with peristalsis, whereas peristalsis is simply just moving that food stuff along the digestive tract. Segmentation is where the non-adjacent segments of your GI tract alternately contract and relax. And what this does is it moves the food forward and backward, and then forward, then backward, and forward and backward. Okay, it seems pretty inefficient in terms of moving the food forward. But what this type of movement is supposed to do is it allows the food in the lumen to be mixed. Okay, so the food content is mixed. So the food we eat must be broken down into smaller molecules that can then be absorbed into the blood or the lymph. Okay, and having the smaller pieces have more surface area available for digestive enzymes to react with. Things like your carbohydrates are going to be broken down into simple sugars. Triglycerides, fat, are broken down into fatty acids, monoglycerides. Proteins broken down to amino acids, etc. Okay. Now, the process of digestion is a series of catabolic steps. Okay. The kind of metabolic steps that are breaking larger molecules into smaller ones. Okay. As you can see, this mechanical breakdown and digestion, they're all breaking big pieces to small pieces. Okay. But now we're breaking down molecules. Okay. Here we're breaking down food stuff, but here in digestion, we're now breaking down molecules. Okay. So it's at a finer level. And we're doing that with the help of digestive enzymes. Okay. And later we'll talk about the different parts of the different accessory organs that secrete digestive enzymes that help this process. Okay. And digestion, sometimes you'll hear it referred to as chemical breakdown. Okay. So here we're using digestive enzymes to break down complex food molecules into simpler chemical building blocks. Now the absorption part is where the passage of the digested fragments of food, whether sugar, fatty acids, or amino acids, they are absorbed from the digestive tract into the blood or the lymphatic. Finally, whatever is remaining in the lumen of your digestive tract passes through the large intestine. Okay. Water is going to be reabsorbed or absorbed through the large intestine, and whatever remains inside the large intestine continues and then comes out as feces, and that process is known as defecation. Okay, so defecation is just pooping essentially. It's the elimination of indigestible substances via anus in the form of feces. Now let's take a look at the anatomy of your alimentary canal or digestive tract. Okay, so there are generally 4 layers that you find throughout your entire gastrointestinal tract. Okay, there are some parts that have additional layer, more layer than this, but in general, all of the digestive tract are going to have these 4 layers. The innermost layer that faces the lumen directly, that is known as the mucosa. Mucosa is the mucous membrane and the innermost layer of your GI tract. Okay, so it's comprised of the lining epithelium. You have the lamina propria. You also have a thin layer of muscle, smooth muscle known as muscularis mucosa. Okay, that's over here. And then moving deeper away from the lumen, you have submucosa. This is the layer of fibrous connective tissue that contains some blood vessels, lymph vessels, as well as some nerves. Moving further outward, you find the muscularis externa. Okay, the muscularis externa, generally speaking, have 2 layers of smooth muscle running in opposite perpendicular directions. So the fibers of those layers run perpendicular to one another. So this allows your digestive tract to contract in different directions. Okay, so one layer is the circular layer, and the other layer is the longitudinal layer. You can see that in general, this is important. You want to make note that the circular layer lies closer to the lumen than the longitudinal layer. So the longitudinal layer is generally more external to the circular layer. Okay, as you can see, depending on the plane of section, okay, these smooth muscle may look like they're running this way or this way. Okay. And finally, you have the serosa. Okay, and the serosa is really the same thing as the visceral peritoneum. This is the outer layer. Okay. Make sure you understand the difference between those terms and mesentery. Mesentery is only where the 2 layers of visceral peritoneum come together. So it's the double layer of visceral peritoneum. Okay. As we just mentioned, the smooth muscle in your GI tract is arranged in 2 sheets, with the outer layer being the longitudinal layer and then the inner one being the circular layer. In your stomach, there is an additional oblique layer of smooth muscle. Okay, and that makes the stomach particularly good at churning and mechanically breaking down foodstuff. Okay. Recall from the muscle chapter that your smooth muscles contract more slowly than the skeletal muscles. Okay, and that is useful because in order for you to digest and break down food stuff effectively, you need to be able to contract over a longer, more extended period of time. Okay, and having a slower acting smooth muscles is useful for that. And recall the smooth muscles, unlike your skeletal muscles, smooth muscles are under involuntary control. Next, we talk about the salivary glands. Okay, so the salivary glands, you have a few different salivary glands. The ones that you have to know are the major ones. Parotid gland, okay, located anterior to your ear. The sublingual, lingual is the tongue. Okay, sublingual is underneath the tongue. Submandibular, well, as you can guess from the name, means it's underneath the mandible. Okay, so these are the 3 glands you have to know. And all of these are considered salivary glands. These glands secrete saliva. Inside your saliva are salivary enzymes that begins the digestion process, the chemical digestion. Okay, particularly it's the carbohydrate that begin to be digested and chemically broken down as early as inside your mouth. Okay, the protein and fat cannot be broken down until those enter your and reach the first part of your small intestine. Okay. Okay, and the saliva also serves to lubricate and moisten your mouth. Okay, as you can see, some of you may be like me, you understand that when you have the tendency for your mouth to stay open at night, your mouth dries and you get a lot more cavity than others. Okay, so typically our saliva is able to lubricate and also serves as a sort of an immune function to prevent cavity. Now, besides the salivary glands, okay, your oral cavity is mostly lined with non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, and that's important because all the chewing, right, that's abrasive forces on your on the mucosa of your cheek. Okay, moving further along. Now your pharynx, we've discussed this part already, but your pharynx is divided into 3 segments: the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Of the 3, only the oropharynx and laryngopharynx are generally common passageway for digestive tract as well as respiratory tract. Okay. And so for them to be able to withstand that friction and abrasive stresses, they are therefore lined with non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Okay. Unlike the nasopharynx, which has quite a bit of the respiratory mucosa. So during swallowing, your food is going to pass from the oral cavity backward. Your tongue pushes it backward. Okay, your epiglottis is going to come down and seal off the airway, and the food is going to move into the oropharynx and then through the laryngopharynx and then continue down into the esophagus. Now your esophagus is also lined with non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. As you can see here, your esophagus is essentially just a muscular tube. Its primary function is to propel food for your oropharynx into and laryngopharynx down into the stomach. So it's only got a transport sort of function. It does not have any mechanical breakdown or digestive roles. Okay, so it doesn't secrete anything that helps with digestion. Okay. And as you can see, it's got this muscularis externa, adventitia, mucosa, submucosa, all these 4 layers that we commonly see in the other parts of digestive tract as well. Okay. And this image shows the esophagus-stomach junction, also known as gastroesophageal junction, or GEJ. Okay. Or you may hear gastro. Yeah, I think it's more commonly known as gastroesophageal junction, actually. So, and how you can tell that's the GEJ, the gastroesophageal junction, is you see the transition from non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium to this simple columnar epithelium that characterizes the stomach. Okay, so this is actually pretty cool. You see that abrupt change in the lining epithelium. Now, in terms of the location of the esophagus, it's located in the posterior mediastinum. It descends into the stomach, okay, and passing through the diaphragm. And around the place where it passes through the diaphragm, there is a sphincter located in between the esophagus and the stomach. That's known as the lower esophageal sphincter. Okay, I don't have an image here, sorry about that. That sphincter is important because it prevents stomach contents from being regurgitated into your esophagus. Okay, and so because your stomach has a lot of acid in there, right, and your esophagus is not particularly designed to handle that strong acid. So having a sphincter there that prevents the regurgitation when your stomach is churning stuff, right? It's very important. But occasionally, right, your stomach is too full. Regurgitation does happen. That's when you get the heartburn. Okay, heartburn actually doesn't have anything to do with heart. Heartburn is really a digestive tract issue where the acid regurgitates into your esophageal lumen, and then burns because this esophagus is not really equipped to handle that acid. Now let's take a look at your stomach. Your stomach extends from the distal esophagus to the duodenum, and its functions is mostly to mechanically break down food into a substance known as chyme. So chyme is kind of this slushy substance that comes from the food being mechanically broken down. Your stomach, the wall of your stomach is able to secrete hydrochloric acid and pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme that begins the process of protein digestion. Okay. So I apologize about the mistake earlier. So the protein digestion actually begins in your stomach, whereas the fat digestion doesn't begin until duodenum. Okay, so let me repeat that again. But your salivary glands are able to secrete an enzyme that begins the process of carbohydrate breakdown. Okay, so starch can be start to break down in your mouth. And then protein don't begin their breakdown until they reach your stomach, where the pepsin begins the breakdown of proteins. And then the fat isn't going to be broken down until it reaches the small intestine. Now, there are a few major regions to your stomach. There is the cardia. Okay, this region. The fundus is this part that protrudes upward. Okay, this part is the body. Okay, and then we have the pylorus over here. And here we have the pyloric sphincter that regulates the rate at which the stomach contents are being emptied into the duodenum. Okay, because your duodenum can only handle the digestive process at a certain rate. If you overwhelm it, it's not going to be able to absorb the nutrients effectively, and then you're just going to end up having diarrhea. Okay, so what needs to happen is your stomach needs to be able to let its contents into the duodenum slowly. Okay, it can't just empty it all at once. It's going to overwhelm your duodenum. Now let's talk about a few key features of the stomach. It's also got the rugae of mucosa. They are these inner wrinkly folds. Okay, and then you have the lesser curvature over here. Okay, and then the greater curvature over here. Okay, notice that extra layer of muscle, smooth muscle, longitudinal layer. It lies, sorry, the oblique layer is the extra layer. Okay, normally you just have longitudinal and circular, but here you have an additional layer that lies deep to those two layers, and that's the oblique layer. I'm sorry, I didn't get enough sleep last night. Okay. Now, if we're to look at the microanatomy or the histology of your stomach, you see that the internal surface of your stomach is lined with the simple columnar epithelium, and these are arranged into these tubular-shaped structures. Okay. So these are known as gastric pits. Okay, and these pits lead into the gastric glands. Okay. And there are different types of cells in these gastric pits, and they have different functions, and that's something you're going to learn more about in physiology. Okay, but some of them will secrete stomach acid, some of them secrete pepsin, and some of them secrete yet other enzymes. Your stomach wall is designed to protect itself against autodigestion. So that since it secretes pepsin, which is a strong enzyme that's able to digest protein. Your stomach is mostly protein, right? Because it's muscle. Muscles, it's like meat, right? When you break meat down, that's protein, right? So you have an enzyme inside that could potentially break down the protein. Okay. You also got a strong acid inside. So there are mechanisms that are that your stomach is characterized by that prevents itself from digesting itself. Okay, and that includes a layer of mucus that lines its inner lining. Okay, another feature is that rapid regeneration of the lining epithelium. So these cells can regenerate at a pretty fast rate. Moving on to your small intestine. This is the longest part of your GI tract. Okay, it's got three subdivisions: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So we begin with the duodenum, move on to jejunum, and then finally the ileum. The main role of your small intestine is the main site for chemical digestion and nutrient absorption. Okay. And so if you cut out someone's small intestine, they would not be able to gain any weight. Okay, and that's actually kind of scary. And so when we look at the microanatomy of small intestine, we'll see that there are structural modifications that make this organ very effective in nutrient absorption. Okay, and what I mean by it is when you zoom in, you see there are these circular folds. Okay, and the circular folds, they function to allow the chyme to kind of swirl around along the wall. So instead of just like moving down fast, it swirls around, and it slows down the passage of the chyme. Okay, and that allows more time for absorption. And if you zoom into these circular folds, you see the villi. Villus is singular, villi is plural. Okay, these villi, they are structures that look like this. Okay, and their function is increased surface area. So if you turn your epithelium into this structure with a lot of folds upon folds, you're dramatically increasing the surface area. That's useful for nutrient absorption. And then if you zoom onto these tiny little crypts further, you'll see on the individual cells, you have what's known as microvilli. Okay, students oftentimes confuse microvilli with villi. Okay, how do you tell whether this picture is demonstrating villi or microvilli? Well, the microvilli are brush borders, or they're extensions from single cells. So if you can see the cell as a whole, and then you see the extension is extending from that single cell, those are microvilli. Okay. When you zoom in into these individual villas, you'll see there are tiny little capillaries. When food or when the nutrients are being absorbed, they are absorbed through the lining into the capillaries. But for fat, they are absorbed through the linings into the lacteal. Okay. So amino acids, which is a chemical building block for proteins, so you'll learn in physiology. Those along with sugars are absorbed into the blood vessels, into the capillaries, whereas fat, when it's broken down, is absorbed into the lacteal. And then later, we'll learn about the organs that contribute to the secretion that are then drained into the duodenum. Okay. Because I'm sure you're wondering, how does duodenum begin the process of digestion without the aid of other organs? Well, yes, we need these other structures, which we'll talk about later in the accessory organs. Okay. But your duodenum can be broken down into further into smaller segments. Okay. The first segment is considered to be the intraperitoneal organ. Okay. The rest of your duodenum is considered to be retroperitoneal. Okay, so just, you don't have to remember that, but just remember duodenum is partly intraperitoneal, partly retroperitoneal. If you're asked to identify an intraperitoneal organ, then please be specific. If you want to use duodenum as an example, please be specific. Oh, about that. Okay. Let's take a brief look at something that we'll discuss in more detail later, also in lab. Okay, but here is your biliary tree. Okay, and your liver is going to secrete bile, which is stored in gallbladder. Gallbladder can release the bile during digestion. And then pancreas also release enzymes. Those can be released through the duct into your duodenum. Okay, so imagine the food is being has entered into the duodenum from the stomach. Okay, and as it enters into the duodenum, these juices and enzymes are being released through this pore. Okay, and this, okay, let me clarify. This dilated portion of the duct, okay, the dilated portion is known as the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Another term for hepatopancreatic ampulla is the ampulla of Vater. The sphincter is the muscle, the smooth muscle that's able to contract around it. Okay, that's the hepatopancreatic sphincter. That sphincter is also known by the name of sphincter of Oddi. Okay, and then the major duodenal papilla is the raised bump. When you view from inside the duodenum, okay, you can see there's a raised bump on the surface of that intestinal wall, and that is known as papilla. Let me try to draw it. So if this is your intestinal wall, you're going to see a raised bump. And that's the hole. Okay, so this part that's raised is known as the papilla, the major duodenal papilla. All right. Time to move on. Now the large intestine. Okay. As you move from the small intestine into the large intestine, the last part of your small intestine is the ileum. Okay. And between the ileum and the large intestine is a valve called the ileocecal valve. Oh crap, sorry. Ileocecal valve. Here it is. Okay, after ileocecal valve, you've reached the first part of your large intestine known as the cecum. The cecum is sort of a dilated part of your large intestine. From the cecum extends the appendix. Okay, and then as you move forward in your digestive tract, you enter the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and then the anus. Now between the ascending colon and the transverse colon is this bend. This is known as the right colic flexure. It's also known as the hepatic flexure. Whereas this other one, okay, between the transverse and the descending colon, this is known as left colic flexure or splenic flexure. And that's because hepatic is referring to the liver. This flexure is closer to the liver. This flexure is closer to the spleen, which is on your left side. Okay. On a test, please don't write right hepatic flexure. Okay, you only have one hepatic flexure. Okay, so right hepatic flexure will be incorrect. So either use right colic flexure or hepatic flexure. Same thing with this. Now there are, so the large intestine, its primary role is absorption of water. Okay, so it does not really absorb any nutrient. It's mostly regulating how much water content ends up being in your feces. So if your large intestine is able to reabsorb more water, then less water is going to be inside the feces, right? If your large intestine isn't reabsorbing water, you're going to end up with more water in your poop. And that, yeah, if it's severe, it can lead to diarrhea. Now, there are a few key features to your large intestine. Okay. These epiploic appendages are fat lobules that extend from various parts of your large intestine. Okay. And their primary function is fat storage. You also have these longitudinal fibrous band known as tinea coli. Finally, you have these muscular pouches. These are known as haustra. Okay. Haustrum is singular, haustra is plural. The haustrum is H-A-U-S-T-R-U-M, so that's singular. Plural is haustra, which is H-A-U-S-T-R-A. I also want to point out that your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, they're all lined by simple columnar epithelium. There are different types of simple columnar epithelium. They all have their own characteristics, but as a whole, they are all lined with variations of simple columnar epithelium. Okay. And if you were to take a closer look at the microanatomy of large intestine, they would not have villi or microvilli, and unlike what you would see in small intestine. So that tells you large intestine is not really designed for effective nutrient absorption. Moving on to the accessory organs. First, we're going to talk about is the liver. Your liver is the largest gland in your body. It performs essentially endless list of very essential functions. You cannot live without your liver. So it's a very, very important organ. We are only going to be able to explore a few of its important functions, but it's got many important functions. It's got an important role in digestion in that it produces bile. Okay, and bile is important for the process of fat emulsification, which is breaking down large fat droplets. And I can post a video on this. Okay. It's also important for the processing of absorbed nutrients. So after those nutrients are absorbed through the small intestine, it enters the bloodstream, and then the bloodstream passes through the liver before it gets returned to the heart and then to the rest of your body. So that's the hepatic portal system. Okay, and that system is very important for removing toxins before the toxins that you ingest is distributed to the rest of your body. And I want to emphasize that since a lot of students confuse the role of liver with gallbladder. Gallbladder does not secrete bile. Gallbladder only stores bile. Okay, so that means someone with their gallbladder removed, they can still live, okay, and they can still digest most things. Okay, they can digest a tiny little bit amount of fat because their liver is still going to be able to secrete bile. But because they no longer have that sac to store the bile, so if they are to eat a fatty meal, something with a more fatty content in there, right? They're not going to be able to secrete increased amount of bile, right? Because their liver can only secrete bile at a certain rate. If it cannot be stored at a gallbladder, there's only a little bit that they can let into the duodenum at that time. And then if that fat cannot be broken down, it cannot be absorbed. So these people will end up with fatty diarrhea. They poop and they see that film of fat floating on the surface of the water in the toilet. Okay. And that happens long term. They could have serious weight loss and nutrient deficiency. Now, let's take a look at the gross anatomy of your liver. Your liver on the anterior side, you can see the right lobe, and then there's the left lobe. Dividing them is the falciform ligament that attaches your liver to the anterior abdominal wall. Okay, extending from the falciform ligament is kind of free hanging. This is the ligamentum teres of your liver, also known as round ligament. Okay, and then on the back side, on the posterior side of your liver, you find two more lobes. There's the caudate lobe, which is more superior, and then there's the quadrate lobe, which is more inferior. Most of the blood vessels that enter or leave the liver, they do that through the porta hepatis, which is this region. Okay. Other structures you find on the visceral surface of your liver include the inferior vena cava, okay, the hepatic veins, not to be confused with the hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein is also known as the portal vein. Okay, even though you have different portal systems in your body, but this one's the most well-known, so oftentimes portal vein simply refers to hepatic portal vein. But it's not the same thing as hepatic veins. Notice that your hepatic portal vein, okay, they carry the blood that's draining from the digestive tract into your liver. And then after that blood has been processed and detoxified, it then drains through tiny little venules that merge to eventually form the hepatic veins. So the hepatic veins, they're carrying blood away from the liver, okay, into the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava then carries that detoxified blood into your right atrium, which then carries it into the pulmonary circulation, then into your left heart, and then your left heart is going to pump and then distribute that blood into your general systemic circulation. Okay, so you can see that the liver serves an important role of detoxifying the nutrients and the, sorry, not the nutrient, the absorb the whatever stuff that's being absorbed through your digestive tract. Okay, losing my voice. Moving on to gallbladder. Okay, and here we're going to talk about the biliary tree. I want you to really memorize how the biliary tree, how the branches of the biliary tree are connected. Okay, what I mean by that is this. You can see here that the right and the left hepatic ducts, they are the parts of the biliary tree that begin inside the liver. They drain from the liver. They join to become the common hepatic duct. Okay, don't use the abbreviation on the test. Okay, whoops. So right and left hepatic ducts join to form the common hepatic duct. The common hepatic duct then joins the cystic duct. The cystic duct is coming from the gallbladder. Okay, so cystic duct joins the common hepatic duct to form the common bile duct. Some texts or your notes may refer to this as bile duct, but please, on test, don't write this as bile duct. All these are bile ducts. Okay, this one specifically is called common bile duct. Common bile duct. Okay. Now the common bile duct then joins with the main pancreatic duct. Okay. And then merging to form that hepatopancreatic ampulla or ampulla of Vater. Okay, you don't have to worry about this accessory pancreatic duct. Okay, that's more minor, but that one also drains into the duodenum. But here, as you can see, okay, the secretions coming from gallbladder, the liver, as well as the pancreas, they all get drained into the duodenum. Now, when the fatty content is sensed, okay, so when the stomach, it empties food stuff or chyme into the small intestine, into the duodenum, okay, your duodenum senses the fatty chyme entering its lumen, okay, and sends a signal to the gallbladder, telling gallbladder to secrete, not secrete, sorry. Remember, the liver is the one that secretes bile, and the bile gets stored in gallbladder. But when the fatty content in the small intestine is sensed, a signal is sent to the gallbladder, telling gallbladder to squeeze and contract to release that bile, okay, down the biliary tree into the duodenal lumen. Okay, so that means the fattier the food you eat, the more the gallbladder is going to squeeze and try to release more bile. Finally, the pancreas. This is one of my favorite organs. This organ is special because, as we've mentioned before, it's got both exocrine as well as endocrine components. Okay. The exocrine components are the acinar cells that secrete digestive enzymes. And they secrete such a wide range of digestive enzymes that their digestive enzymes, they have digestive enzymes secreted for carbohydrate digestion, protein digestion, as well as lipid digestion. Okay, so it's able to digest the secretion, so the enzymes that are secreted by your pancreas. It's able to digest all three categories of food, okay? Carbohydrate, protein, and fat. So that's the exocrine. Okay, exocrine meaning the secretions they're secreted into a duct. The duct eventually leads into the duodenum here. The endocrine, remember what endocrine means. Endocrine means it releases its secretion into blood, okay, and it's hormones. So these pancreatic islets or islets of Langerhans, their cells secrete the hormones like insulin and glucagon, and those get released into blood and travel to other sites. In addition to secreting digestive enzymes, your pancreas is also able to release an alkaline fluid. So alkaline is the opposite of acidic. Okay, and this alkaline fluid helps balance the acidity of that chyme coming from the stomach. Okay, so it helps neutralize it. Both the enzymes as well as the alkaline fluid is secreted, is released into the duodenum. Okay, and I believe that concludes our lecture for today.